and welcome to True Crime with Emma Kenny. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, because I release new content every single Sunday at the same time. And I do put quite a lot of effort into it, so I'd really appreciate your sub and your likes and obviously your chat, which I love reading. I can't believe how into crime you guys are. It really makes me happy to read the comments and also to get schooled. A lot of you school me on things that I didn't know, and I really appreciate it. Today, we're going to be talking about the Spalding killers. That's Lucas Markham and Kim Edwards. It was a British crime, and it is pretty terrifying because of the fact that they are both really young people. Today, we're going to explore the crime itself, but also my opinions on it that might surprise you. Everybody has some really big feelings when young people kill. And I think, with respect, that a lot of people seem to think that young people who kill are worse than older people who kill. And I have to say, I really disagree with that perspective. I'm going to put my feelings out there before I even start. I do not believe that young people are as culpable as adults, because I do not believe that their brain is fully formed, and therefore the decisions that they make and the consciousness that they have in their world is not fully developed. And the reason I say that is, imagine some of the decisions that you would have made at 15 and look at yourself now as an adult. Would you have made those choices? The likelihood is that you wouldn't. The likelihood is that a lot of us would have done reckless things. We would have put ourselves in challenging positions. We would have done things that could have caused ourselves harm as young people. But because we didn't necessarily navigate the world in the way that we do as an adult, we kind of didn't do the things that were necessarily good for us. We did the things that we thought that we'd get the most out of enjoyment-wise. So that's why I don't genuinely feel that adults and children are comparable when it comes down to crime. That does not excuse what I'm going to talk about, and it certainly does not excuse the culpability regarding the crime itself. But just to let you know where psychologically I feel I am on that spectrum of who is worse, the adult or the child, when it comes down to killing. Although obviously it's completely reprehensible when anybody kills anybody, full stop, period, over. So who are Lucas Markham and Kim Edwards? Well, first of all, they were both outsiders to some degree. They both had their issues. They met at high school. They were in a queue for an IT lesson. And it was one of those scenarios where they started chatting and they decided that they wanted to be girlfriend and boyfriend. They got on really well. And to those people around them, they were just in a classic teenage relationship. However, it was relatively intense. I think a lot of us can relate back to how we felt as teenagers. It's an awkward phase, and often you're looking to fit in somewhere. You want to connect, you want to belong, and it can feel like a really isolating space to be a teenager, particularly if your life isn't that great at home or you have certain challenges academically. To suddenly find somebody that you connect with, and particularly now with so much online, you can kind of keep those connections far greater and larger than they would be when I was a child growing up, where you had to ask your parents if you could use the phone, which was basically connected to the wall in the main room where everybody could hear you. So it wasn't conducive to intense relationships when you were a teenager. But I think young people now have got this intensity available to them. So when they leave school, they can talk to each other on a range of social media apps. And it means that relationships can develop pretty fast. And certainly in this case, Markham and Edwards definitely seem to fit that paradigm. We get an insight into the personalities of and also the relationship with each other when he is given a detention at school. And the way that they respond to this is they run away together. Basically, they take food, clothing, and a tent with them, and they abscond. So think about that for a moment. It's a really dramatic overreaction, isn't it? I mean, it's a detention, no big deal. But it says something about the way they perceive themselves. You know, as young people, is it a we against the world point of view? That they see themselves as victims and that they're being chased away to some degree. You know, they don't belong. So they're kind of accepting that and moving forward by leaving the situation. It also says that they're not really thinking about anybody else's feelings. I mean, imagine being a parent and no matter how problematic your relationship might be with your child, they suddenly disappear That's going to be terrifying. So again, it's a very egocentric and relation-centric reaction. The police obviously want to know where they are. They appeal for sightings of the pair in Spalding, which is where they live, or in the nearby villages of Cowbit and Crowland. And 5 days later, 5 days, they're found safe and well, but 5 days they've been away. And this is all a reaction to him getting a detention. So just that dramatic impact that those two have on their world, just because of this really slight misdemeanor that needs to be met. But again, it tells me that there's something within that relationship that is feeding the other within the relationship. You know, this desire to be together, this desire to be seen as people who need to escape, this total belief that they are connected and the world is against them. That's definitely playing in to that psyche, isn't it? Another really important thing to know is that Kim Edwards was an individual who definitely had some mental health issues. In the past, she has actually expressed suicidal thoughts. She's even made an attempt on her own life, which has resulted in her spending 2 days in hospital. What's going on for her? I mean, to be that young and suicidal, and to actually have taken that suicidal feeling and put it into action, this isn't a happy young person. And no matter what judgments I may have on the actions that she eventually goes through with, I think we have to acknowledge that we're dealing with two teenagers who are very dysfunctional and are having really big problems with their own mental health. These are children. No matter what they end up concocting and doing, they are children. And at least one of these children is in quite intense personal pain to the point where she doesn't want to be here. And that's a serious attempt. To end up spending 2 days in hospital demonstrates the level of unhappiness in her life. Now, this relationship isn't seen as a particular positive one, particularly Kim Edwards' mum isn't that happy about it. She obviously feels that the intensity and the fact that they've run away is probably not helping her daughter's mental health. And whatever is going on between the two, we can arguably see that they were certainly looking for a way to escape their world. And this is potentially how we arrive at the situation where Edwards and Markham decide to go through with murdering her mother and sister, because there is a desire to change and shift the shape of their world. And even though that's a very extreme way of doing it, again, it's about changing something dramatically, isn't it? Running away for 5 days, trying to kill herself, trying to change her state, change her life. And now she has the perfect ally in Markham. Now, 10 days before the murders actually happened, I just want to bring you into the world of Kim Edwards and her mother. There's lots of conflicting ideas about the relationship between Kim Edwards and her mum, which I'll go into shortly. But we know that 10 days before she kills or is involved in the killing of her mother and sister, she actually exchanges this late night message with her mum, and her mother asks her why she's changed her profile picture. She says, "Where's your beautiful smile?" And Edwards replies, "It's disappeared." And then her mum says, "Why, hun?" And she says, "I think it's under your bed, lol." So this kind of quite sweet exchange where her mum is really concerned about the fact that she can see that her child is in distress. That's important, isn't it? So we do know that Kim Edwards did have a relationship that was cordial to some degree with her mother. Like I said, we do know some things about her past. For example, Kim Edwards did spend some time in the care system, whereas her sister didn't. That always makes me think to myself, was there some resentment? Was there some hidden rage? Did Kim Edwards feel rejected and abandoned? Had she built hostilities towards her mother because she felt that she'd been singled out when her sister hadn't? Attachment issues are very powerful when a child is growing up. And if you feel that you were rejected when a sibling was accepted, arguably you can hoard some pretty negative feelings towards the individuals that you believe let you down. And that isn't a judgment on Kim Edwards' mum, because we don't know the ins and outs of why she ended up in that situation. But what we can agree on is, for a child in care, it's not an easy situation. It's not an easy journey. And for that child the abandonment can be pretty catastrophic. It doesn't give any leverage or excuse for criminal behaviour, but it introduces us into a more problematic psychological world. And I think Kim Edwards certainly was struggling. We know she was struggling at school. We know that she was struggling with her mental health. We know that she had struggled enough to end up in the care system to some degree. There are a lot of big features there. And now she's dealing with adolescence and she's found her perfect partner in crime. And I don't mean that literally, although it actually ends up to be literally. I mean that more of a we against the world, a sense that I have my partner and we can face anything together. They are really intoxicating feelings when you're a young person. And if you happen to meet somebody who almost reflects the way that you feel, and Markham himself is struggling. So she doesn't just find somebody who wants her, finds her attractive, wants her to be there. She potentially feels understood. And when you feel like a square trying to fit into a round hole, the minute that you find somebody else who reflects the same shape, it's really helpful and compelling for you in your life because you suddenly feel that somebody gets you. And I think with Markham and Edwards, that's what's happened. They find each other in such a way that they feel understood, they feel valued. Those missing chinks that they believe don't exist in their foundation because of abandonment and attachment and dysfunction suddenly seems to fit perfectly. And that's why they're so fused. Now, we do know that there are some pretty big arguments before Markham and Edwards go through with the crime that they commit. For example, not long before the murders, Markham and Edwards are actually barricading themselves in her bedroom because her mother is basically having an argument with her and suggesting that she's going to end up like her absent father. He was a drug addict, so again, we have another chink in the foundation. And it also clearly demonstrates that there may be some kind of friction between mum and daughter regarding who Kim Edwards reminds her mother of. Not a judgment on her mum. A lot of people say things in conflict. But if you're a child who already feels abandoned and then a parent is suggesting that you are worth less than or is compared negatively to somebody who may have also abandoned and rejected you, come on, that's going to hurt. It's going to have an impact. And they actually stay in that room for the entire night until 2 p.m. the next day. So we know that even though Kim Edwards is living in her parents' house, her mum hasn't got a lot of power. Because for a lot of us, if we had a teenager barricaded in their room with a child that they were seeing, we would get in there. Come hell or high water, they would not get to stay in that space. They certainly wouldn't get to then go and climb out of the window. We would not allow it. So there are some loose boundaries. And that definitely plays out in this scenario where Kim Edwards feels more in control of her life than she should do because clearly she doesn't feel in control genuinely anywhere else in her world. Is she trying to exert control in this one space because she feels that she has some power? So how do these guys, these two pretty ordinary young people, teenagers, make a decision to go from girlfriend and boyfriend to multiple murderers? Because that's a massive, massive leap, isn't it? We know that when they're in McDonald's on one occasion, they actually talk about the fact that they want to get rid of her mother. Kim Edwards is convinced that she needs to end her mother's life. She doesn't want her in this world. We also know that this kind of conversation occurs again in Edwards' back garden of the family home. And it's at that point that they make a pact to kill both her mother and her sister. And they do it in a pretty detailed way. First of all, they decide that the way that they're going to kill them is to stab them through their voice box. They want to stifle the screams. They need a code, of course, because how is he going to get in at a period of time where people are asleep? So they agree that Markham will come, he will knock 3 times on a rear window, then he'll climb into the property through a bathroom window which will have been left open by Edwards. Now, this is unbelievable, but later that night, the same night they have that discussion, Markham actually goes to the house, but Edwards is actually asleep. So he knocks 3 times, but he can't get into the property. So this just shows you how powerful this relationship is. It's gone from adolescent discussions of fantasy. Listen, we do that. Come on, admit it. Most of us have had fantasies of harming somebody who's hurt us. A lot of us do that. Some of you might be listening to this and you're not the kind of people who have images in your head. But if you are like me and you have images in your head, I've set fire to people in my head. You know, I'm not going to go and do it. It's not actually a real fantasy. It's just a minute where you kind of play with this idea that kind of soothes the feeling to help you deal with your frustration and anger, right? But that's where it's left. The fact that they have such low impulse control that Markham is actually going that very same evening to essentially end the life of Kim Edwards' mother and sister shows you how deep they are in this connection-wise. But Kim Edwards is asleep. What does that say to you about her mindset? How would you be expected to feel if you knew that your boyfriend was coming to kill your mother and sister? Would you sleep? That really interests me. Because whereas Markham is awake, probably full of nervous energy, planning how he's going to do it, probably feeling a little bit sick, afraid, maybe even excited, who knows? Kim Edwards goes to sleep. I think that introduces us, doesn't it, to a low conscience. Because you would imagine she'd be anticipating what happens next and be afraid, at least, or concerned about them getting caught, or thinking about the consequences, maybe. Or maybe this also introduces the vague possibility, although I'm less convinced of this because I've seen the interviews with Kim Edwards with the police, and she certainly seems to understand what she was doing and why she was doing it. But let's just play with this one, that maybe she never thought that he'd go through with it. Maybe this folie deux was never going to take place. Maybe she thought that she could have all these fantasies with Markham, but he wouldn't really turn up. And that's why she falls asleep, because in her head it's just a fantasy. We can always throw that in there. I don't think I believe that one, but it is a possibility, isn't it? So a day later, Edwards again falls asleep. Can you believe that? So he turns up again, knocks on the window again, and she's asleep again. So this is the second time that Markham has been round. The second opportunity for him to realise this is not something he wants to go through with. A second opportunity for her to realise this is ridiculous. We need to stop doing this. This is terrible what we're thinking of. But no, it does neither of those things. And that's important, isn't it? You know, premeditated murder is very different from somebody who kills in the spur of the moment. Obviously, completely inexcusable, whatever the scenario. Let's take a crime of passion, though. Somebody finds out that somebody's had an affair, and the next minute they punch them, and that person who is hit dies. Reprehensible, absolutely, completely bang to rights as far as being guilty, but not premeditated. These guys didn't just plan it, didn't just plan that they were going to stab the voice boxes to stop the screams, straight out of a horror movie. Also, pretty sophisticated, not necessarily something that I would think about or you would think about, but it's the fact that they have multiple occasions to call this off, and they don't call it off. On April the 13th, which is a Wednesday, around midnight, Edwards does hear the 3 knocks on the window of the bedroom that she shares with her sister Katie. And then she goes and lets Markham into the bathroom, which is the window that he gets in, and he passes her a bag containing spare clothing and 4 knives. So this is really premeditated. Also, it shows you the confidence that they have, right? Because Katie is sharing the same room as Kim, and she could easily have woken up. There are all these possibilities that could have interjected this crime, But for whatever reason, fate doesn't play out that way. And Kim Edwards gets to let Markham into the bathroom, and he is prepared. So this is really premeditated. He's got spare clothing. He knows they're going to get bloody. He's actually prepared himself that way. This is the third occasion that he's come. Now, terrifying as this is, this scene, I think we just have to stand in awe at these two young people's precise planning to this point. Because they really are prepared. I mean, he's had lots of opportunities to back out, so has she. He's come with the weapons, enough for both of them. And he also knows that he's going to need spare clothes. That's pretty sophisticated planning for young people who, with respect, are struggling at school and can't even handle a detention. So these guys are serious. They've agreed to split the killing. That's the original plan. So the original plan is that Markham will kill Kim Edwards' mother and that Kim Edwards will kill her sister. Can you imagine having that discussion at that age? Who are you going to kill? How are you going to kill? This is her mother and her sister. To all intents and purposes, whilst Kim Edwards did not have a great relationship with Elizabeth Edwards, her mum, she certainly didn't have a terrible one. And without doubt, I've seen her interviewed, and she didn't have a problem with her sister, Katie Edwards. It seems a very cool, calm, and calculated desire to both be in this equally, to make sure that they both have their part to play in these murders. One of the things that Markham does is he says that he'll actually kill both of them because Kim Edwards decides that she doesn't want to kill her sister. Again, at this point, it's pivotal, isn't it? Markham could say, well, maybe you don't want to kill either of them. Maybe this is a terrible plan. Maybe we should just call this whole thing off. But it seems like he's so intoxicated in this relationship. He so desires pleasing her that he's willing to go ahead and kill both her mother and sister. Arguably, a lot of people will say, and I completely hear this point of view, maybe he wanted to kill. Maybe he was thrilled at the idea of killing. Maybe she was a convenient excuse, so he got to kill two people. I don't think that's the case. And I also am not blaming Kim Edwards purely for this. But I'm saying that for me, personally, I think Markham is at an age where he's desperate to impress the girl that he thinks he's in love with. And she's unhappy, really unhappy with her life. And he wants to make her happy. And the immaturity emotionally and on a consciousness level and on a conscience level just isn't tripping the right systems to make him take a look at what's going on and what could happen. And there is a reason for that. The big reason for this is even though he's brought his spare clothes, neither Kim Edwards nor Markham think that they're going to leave that house. Because they aren't just going to kill Kim Edwards' sister and mother. They're going to kill themselves. They've made a pact that once they've carried out the murders, they're going to end their own lives. So this is a very sophisticated murder to the point where they've decided how, when, where, why they're going to do it. But there's no planning for after this because their intention is they're going to kill themselves. The murders are horrific. It's as simple as that. There's no easy way to say it. Markham goes ahead, he smothers and he stabs both of the victims through the neck. So he goes ahead with that plan. And actually one of the things that Kim Edwards really struggled with was the smell of the blood because there was so much of it. She didn't expect to smell it. She hadn't thought that far ahead. And we know that, there was fight back. So it wasn't that the victims died quickly and peacefully in any way, shape or form. It was a violent, vicious attack. And it would have been a terrible experience for both of those individuals, waking up to that pain and torment, and also to the confusion. I often think about that when it's family killers. I think out of all the types of killings, they're the ones that really stay with me in a way that stains the way you think about family and the unification of family. The idea that we could be living with our murderers, it just beggars belief, doesn't it? The idea that one night in your own home with people that you love, that you've shared your life with, you could wake up to being murdered by something that they'd planned. I mean, that's just got to be the stuff out of horror movies, hasn't it? Because there's something almost written into the code of family, and that is that blood is thicker than water, and that you will protect your nearest and dearest. And I can never imagine the shock that someone would feel realizing that they are being killed by people that they know. And certainly in this case, Edwards' family would have realized that it was Markham, so they would have instantly known that the marker and the reasoning behind that was because Kim Edwards was involved. She'd let him in. Can you imagine what that would be like in those last moments between this life and the next? Just knowing and feeling and seeing that. Oh, it makes you shiver. So they go ahead, they've killed them, and now, of course, it's time for them to take their own lives. And you see, this is the problem. Actually, this is the problem in a lot of cases of things like familicide and patricide, where people think that they're going to be able to kill themselves after an event. It's actually not that easy. It really isn't. Your brain has got these really protective mechanisms. You might not think that they have. You might not think your brain will stop you doing something. But actually, if you are not in a suicidal state, you're going to really struggle to take your own life. You're going to have all these thoughts and feelings going through your head that are telling you not to do it, to just wait a little bit longer. That's why most of us can get through really bad times. It's not that we don't think about suicide. It's not that we don't have those dark thoughts and feelings. It's just that there's something in the back of our mind that kind of says, just hang on, right? Just hang on. So they don't go through with it. So suddenly, that sophisticated plan that they had, all that organization that led to that point, hadn't planned for after. Because there wasn't meant to be an after. And now, we return to child state. They've gone ahead, they've worked their plan, they've murdered Kim Edwards' mum and sister, and that's where the story's ended. They haven't made any plans for what do we do next. So, essentially, they go downstairs, they don't want to be near the bodies, they cover the bodies up, and they do what teenagers do, which typical teenagers. They watch Twilight reruns, they eat ice cream, they have sex, they just waste time together. Because they've realized that they can't go through with the suicide, they haven't got a clue what to do next, their teenage brains haven't formulated anything to manage these kind of feelings, so they do nothing. It's why they're known as the Twilight killers, because after they've murdered the mum and sister of Kim Edwards, they just went downstairs and watched TV. And okay, people can use that because it makes them sound like there was some kind of vampiric Satan believers, but it wasn't. They were just watching favourite movies, trying to forget potentially what they'd done, trying to avoid the reality of the consequences that they just created for themselves because they were big consequences. Now, Edwards and Markham don't go to school, and obviously neither does Kim Edwards' sister, So they're reported missing to the police by both the school and by his aunt. Now, despite the fact that both of them are inside 5 Dawson Avenue, they don't answer the door. So the police come, people knock on from the family, and 3 times the door is knocked on and it's unanswered. So they know that their time is limited. They know that at some point they're going to have to confront these issues, but they're just buying time. They're so unprepared for this. On Friday, April the 15th, by that point, there's enough to warrant the police forcing entry to 5 Dawson Avenue. And they find Kim Edwards and Markham just basically relaxing downstairs. And first of all, they're relieved because, here we are, we've got the 2 kids that we thought were missing. And if they're safe, well, it makes sense that everyone's safe, right? But they go upstairs and they find both Mrs. Edwards and Katie dead in their beds. Immediately, both Kim Edwards and Markham are arrested on suspicion of murder. Straight away, Edwards makes a full admission to the police. She tells them everything. Step-by-step account of the murders, step-by-step account of the planning. She even tells the detectives the plan was fully agreed between her and her boyfriend. She says that we made sure we were both definitely okay with it, and he continuously asked me if I still wanted to go through with it, and I said yes. We went over the plan over and over again. No conscience about it. Just an acknowledgement, an acceptance. And you want to watch the actual interviews because it is quite powerful to see her answering the questions. She's very well spoken, she's intelligent, she's articulate, incredibly open about what she's done. Isn't trying to pin the blame on him either. As in, she isn't saying, I was coerced at this point, I was told to do it at this point. She's very much honest about the fact that they were both involved, they were both engaged. But it's chilling and also quite upsetting to watch, because you're just thinking to yourself as you watch these interviews, what happened to this kid? What went wrong with this child? That she can so articulately describe the demise and death and murder of her own family.
She looks out the window, sees me there, she waves, I put my thumbs up, and then she goes to the bathroom window.
Okay, and what happens then?
She opens the bathroom window, I pass my bag through, I get through, and then she opens my bag, and I take a knife out, and I pass her a knife. I don't even know why I did that, just to make sure. And she holded the knife, but never used the knife. The knife is still in the bathroom with the other knives. And then I went into her mum's room, stabbed her in the neck while she was asleep on her side, and smothered her face with a pillow. And after I knew she was gone, I went into Katie's room, which is the same room as Kim's, and I thought I stabbed her, but I'm not 100% sure if it was like her on the mattress. And then I smothered her face with a pillow too.
She was laying on her side, and I don't know really how he stabbed her, but he stabbed her through the neck, I think, through that way, because she was on the side. Okay. I went into the room to see what was going on because I heard noises and stuff. So I just wanted to check if he was okay. He was on top of her, with a pillow over her head. Even though her voice box and that was I thought I heard her say get off me, but I'm not entirely sure. Then after about 10 minutes of Lucas putting his weight on her, she was dead.
Now you'd imagine that both of them would immediately plead guilty to murder. After all, they have been caught at the scene. They've both admitted their involvement. But initially, Edwards and Markham only admit manslaughter. They say not guilty to murder. I mean, that's a very challenging line to take, because clearly they've admitted premeditated murder, but arguably they make a decision to do that. Markham actually changes his plea to murder. And it makes sense. There's absolutely no way that he would have been able to get away with a manslaughter defence. It was premeditated, it was planned. He brought the weapons and the spare clothes. He murdered them, and then he hung out at the place where those killings had taken place. Now, even though Kim Edwards didn't strike a blow, so she didn't actually physically attack or kill her mother or sister, the prosecution want her held equally as culpable. As far as they are concerned, she was a driving force in these murders, and she needed to be held as accountable as Markham. In fact, Mr. Joyce told the jurors the only issue in this case is whether Edwards has a defence of diminished responsibility, which the jury don't agree with, because she's found guilty of murder by a completely unanimous verdict. I don't think it could have gone any other way, because she admitted everything, and because her mother and her sister were clearly not guilty of anything, apart from maybe having a frictious relationship at times with one another. Edwards and Markham actually got life sentences. Now, they got a minimum of serving 20 years. 20 years, it's a long time. And the judge in the case, Mr. Justice Haddon Cave, said the killings were brutal in the form of executions. And both victims, particularly Elizabeth Edwards, must have suffered terribly in the last minutes of their lives. In spite of getting that 20-year sentence and being told that they had to serve it, they actually appealed it. And they did get them reduced to 17 years by the Court of Appeal, which also gave permission for them to be named, which is why I can say those names, because there are cases where children are not allowed to be named, because the hope is in the future they'll be reformed and they'll be able to continue their lives without much upheaval and without the judgment of those around them. Whereas in this case, it was seen as so serious that it was in the public interest for both Edwards and Markham to be named. I don't know how you guys feel about the fact that they were given a reduction to their sentence. Now, this is where I find it really difficult to find balance, because I know that young people are malleable. I know that they can change with the right kind of help. I've seen young people who did reprehensible crimes in their youth not only be rehabilitated, but be educated, to be psychologically well adjusted through therapy, and to go on to live successful lives, even community-orientated lives where they help people and are good to people and have families of their own and would not commit another crime. It is definitely possible. When it comes down to Kim Edwards, you automatically feel that there is an antisocial personality disorder there. The way that she expresses her lack of remorse at the time for the crimes, when she talks about the crime in the interviews, she says that she kills her sister, or has her sister executed basically by her boyfriend, because she doesn't want her sister to have to manage the pain of not being with her mother. So she has her murdered so her sister doesn't have to deal with the grief that she'll have to deal with if Kim Edwards just has her mother murdered. Again, that gives us insight, doesn't it? This idea that Kim Edwards has got this resentment and anger and hostility towards her mother. It's her that she wants to kill, and yet she has this twisted conscience, this belief that somehow it would be easier for her sister to be stabbed through the windpipe and die horribly than it would be for her to be allowed to live, to come to terms with the grief of losing a mother. Or even better, maybe don't kill them, Kim. But I'm also drawn to that sense that it feels like we have a developing psychopath in Kim Edwards. We have somebody with low conscience, poor impulse control, a relatively high level of self-destructiveness as well. We know that she tried killing herself. We know that she did intend to kill herself after the murders but couldn't go through with it. I often wonder whether that came down to the relationship that she had with Markham. If she hadn't had that relationship with him, obviously, one level, hopefully her mother and sister wouldn't have died. But maybe if she hadn't been with him, she wouldn't have had meaning in her life, which would have led to her being less willing to stay around if she'd carried out the murders. But ironically, the fact that she has these strong feelings that connect and tether her to him, potentially connect and tether her to life also. Either way, we are left with this knowledge that at some point in the future, those two individuals will leave prison and will potentially get to live their lives fully in our community, maybe have their own children, get married. The big question is, can they be rehabilitated? And it's a really big question. The evidence says that at times they can. Let's look at the Bulger killers. We have Thompson and Venables, one who has thrived and lives quietly in our communities without us knowing, one of them who has fallen, back in prison, back in the system, consistently unable to create a foundation within his community. So it was a 50-50 there, one who's thrived, one who's failed. It can happen that young people can be rehabilitated. Their brains are malleable. With the right amount of help and support, it can mean that in the end, they can live a life of decency amongst us. The big question is, do you think they deserve to? And that's the one that people struggle with. Do two individuals who decided to brutally torture and murder their family members or the relations of their partner's family members, do they deserve that opportunity? I'd really like to know your thoughts. Because, as I said at the very beginning, I'm more inclined to find a level of acceptance and a belief in rehabilitation when it's young people who offended than I am when it comes down to adults. But do you think that it's possible to rehabilitate young people? Do you think that these people, even if they can be rehabilitated, do they have a right to walk the streets? Do they have a right to live amongst us? Or did they withdraw that right when they decided to brutally murder two completely innocent human beings? That's the question, isn't it? And I'll leave it open to you to give me your answers, because I think that a lot of us struggle with this particular type of crime for many, many reasons. One, because they're kids. Two, because they did something reprehensible. And three, because it lends the question, do we believe in reparation and restoration? Do we believe in hope and change? Or do we at times think that some people really are beyond help? Let me know. I hope you've enjoyed to some degree. I always use that word in a way that has a level of, that doesn't sound quite right, but I hope you've been interested in what I've talked about. This particular crime is shocking because it's young people, and it always feels more shocking when it's young people. I would love to have your thoughts, your feelings, your discussions, your beliefs. Please let me know. I do read them, and I'll be back next week, same time, same place, with another true crime. Thanks for watching, and remember, I've got a crime tour out this year, so if you're in the UK, you can come and see me, and I have an app called Appy. Look it up on the Play Store or on the App Store. It's Appy Wellbeing, completely free, all your health, fitness, nutrition, and wellness advice and guidance, all in one app, and you'll never have to pay a penny. And there's none of that weird upsell stuff either. It is just genuinely free. Take care, see you next week.